Y'all heading for the hills. Come on, come on.
What time does the 7 o'clock meeting start?
7 o'clock. We're a little off timing, but thank you, Sean. You were, but the rest of them were not with you, Bubba. We were over in a power chant over here, and we were asleep over here. You guys want to try it again? What time's the 7 o'clock meeting start? 7 o'clock. That was so much better. We open every meeting of Position and Neutrality with a prayer, and Chaplain Lee stayed tonight to do that just for us.
Come on, stand to your feet all over the room. Father, we welcome you on tonight. We give you all the praise, glory, and honor. We thank you, Lord, for meeting us here tonight. We recognize the attacks all over this world, but most of all, Lord, you're in charge of everything. And now even in this place, God, where you rest, we give you the praise, glory. And we ask you, Lord, to come in and use your manservant to speak on tonight about that 8th step, Lord. We know that things happen and you're here in control. We recognize the power that's down on the inside of us, and it comes from none other than you. So we thank you, we praise you, we glorify you, and we welcome you on tonight. We welcome all of our guests in the house tonight and everyone that is present, and we give you all the praise in the mighty name of Jesus. Let everyone say amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chap. So, who's in the room for the first time tonight? Anybody? Oh, good. We're good. First of all, welcome. So second, let us warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. And the primary reason that's liable to happen is we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years. We just take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book's been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. Yes? So what we attempt to do here, what I'm going to try and do for you tonight is I'm going to show you how I find my experience in this book and encourage you to have your experience with it. And if we both do our job, we'll share a spiritual experience in this room tonight. How many of you have been here before and can witness for folks that happens? So the folks raising their hands, you on camera, you can't see them because of the anonymous nature of our fellowships. We're going to talk to those people on camera in a minute, but first let's finish what I'm doing because I'm a little challenged. I got to stay on track or I'll get lost. Anyway, I'm going to show you how I find my experience. I'm going to encourage you to have your experience, and if we both do our job, we'll share the spiritual experience. And the reason we want to do that is when you feel that spirit, when you feel that power within you, I'm going to call it to your attention. I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention. Because we would cheat you to talk to you about the power we call God without giving a demonstration of the power. The other way you'll know, anytime I say God, they'll say, because we want to call your attention to the experience, not some bad experience or some theology, but the experience of power found within. Power to inspire, power to transform, power to redeem. Yes? Okay, so tonight we're taking a look at steps 8 and 9. The chap kind of tipped it. I told you too. Some people dread that idea, but the reality is we should aspire to these because this is the freedom step, the purpose step. So this is what we want to get. This is what we want to run in, yeah? The other thing we like to do now, we got some news about 2-3 weeks ago that we are once again available on all the prison yards in Arizona. They're getting to watch us. So if you don't know our history here, this is a home for people that get out of prison and need a little runway to get going. And what we always want to let those people in all the yards in Arizona know is that we got a place for them and we're here to greet them and welcome them home. Can you do that one more time? Some of you even felt that. I'm feeling you feel it. How many of you felt that? How many of you got a shout out on the yard and knew there was a place for you? It really means a lot if you're sitting there, doesn't it? All right, so tonight we're going to take a look at steps 8 and 9, and you'll find that in page 76 of your book. About the middle of the page, the authors say, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Do you recognize that from another book, anybody? Yeah, specifically the book of James, yes? And why would we call that to our attention in a fellowship of peers? Are you not inspired by your brothers and sisters who have come from where you've been and proven the statistics wrong and made something of yourself? Yeah. How would they know that unless you were actually doing those things? So the reason faith without works is dead is, even if I have great faith, if I don't demonstrate that faith, it dies with me. But if I demonstrate it and it inspires you, we get bigger and bigger and bigger, don't we? Okay, so it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Do any of you have such a list, or did you once have such a list? Where did you get it? I heard some of you say you got it from your 4th step and 5th step work. Is that similar to everyone else? So what they said is we made it when we took inventory. Why do I call that to your attention?
Because we have a common solution.
We have a common solution. We have a promise that says, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. If you're finding yourself in the experiential path they've laid out, does that not inspire hope? Okay, then it says, now we go out, we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. Do you guys know that the 9th step, the 8-step list, is about reparation, not apology? Right. Apologies are fine, but it's not enough if I'm going to outgrow my limiting thoughts. Does that make sense? Okay, so we attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. They're telling us very clearly in their experience that willingness is divine power. Does that make sense? Yes, you can say that again. Say it louder. So someone said God, but no one said power. So divine power. So when I lack the ability from within me to do that which I really need to do to get where I'm going, I ask until it comes. Does that make sense? For those of you that are more biblically based, He is our righteousness. Does that make sense? Okay. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. They put that in italics. Why do you think they did that? It's important. They're reminding me of what I agreed, and I think subtly they're reminding me of who I made the agreement with. Who did I make the agreement with? Power found on the inside. Yes? So there's no point in lying because power is found inside of me. Does it make sense? Okay. So I got to keep that agreement or not keep that agreement, but either way, the power knows. All right, so probably there are still some misgivings.
No shit.
Sean apparently had some misgivings. Can any of you think of some misgivings you might have when you're thinking about going out and making amends for harms done? The authors are just pointing out to us that's a common thing. We're not unique in having misgivings, yes? So it says, as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. So how many of you, I shouldn't even ask that in this room, how many of you have some rather nefarious business acquaintances? Should see a lot more hands. So the idea of going out to some of the people that we were running and gunning with may seem a little bit disingenuous or scary or, right? Yes? So we may feel a little iffy about going out to do that, to some if not all, based on who we have been, yes? So they're acknowledging that first. I'm going to have to get honest with the power in me so I can let that power know in real time where my shortcomings are. And one of my shortcomings is I still care how you think about me, even though many of my actions have indicated I didn't. Any of you else like that? You're back there laughing at me, Wayne. Okay. So let us be assured, to some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. So it's not about me anyway anymore. If I'm doing this right, it's about how's my approach to you going to affect you based on your experience of me. So if it's not going to be received as a genuine expression, then the timing's not right. I'm better to let you discover the change in me than announce the change in me. Does that make sense? All right, so it says at the moment we're trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God. Oh, that was weak. You guys can do so much better. Maximum service to God and the people about us. So, remember I told you this was the freedom step, the purpose step. So our real purpose is to fit ourselves. So take captive the thoughts, subordinate the ego to the spirit, and go forth and act as I should, not as I once did or maybe may still want to. Any of you found that you have power to be kinder than you feel like being? Is that happened to you on a progressive basis as you grew? Have you found that over time some of the things that used to really enrage you don't even trouble you anymore? So you outgrew fear in those areas of your life. Some of you are feeling that. Who's feeling that? That's the power down on the inside of you. We call that power what? Threw your ringer, didn't I? Okay. All right. So it's seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we've gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lie ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious wars? There's a question mark. In this book, when they put a question mark, that's time to go inward. Eyesight without insight is spiritual blindness. So I want to know how it's going to appear. Does that make sense? And I'm also going to check my thinking. Am I not making this approach because they're not ready to see this about me, or am I not making this approach because I don't want them to think something about me I don't want them to know? Right? You're starting to get the guidance from within instead of taking all your guidance from the world. All right, so we may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. How does one carry a beneficial message? Yeah, you're probably going to demonstrate it. You're probably going to talk a lot less than you walk, aren't you? So, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. So now they're telling us what we probably already know. Are you not more impressed by somebody showing up with some demonstration of their contrition rather than just a proclamation of their contrition? So he's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. So we got to think about who we've been and then act in the way we're now directed, what we've committed to do, and they will, in time, notice that change, and they'll ask, and then we can honor our third step, his love, his power, his way of life. Does that make sense? Yeah, God, say that. There you go. So we don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. That was pretty good. What do you think, Sean? When it'll serve any good purpose, we're willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. So how would I determine it would serve a good purpose? Someone would probably ask, how many of you have been preached at when you didn't ask for a sermon? How many of you even don't really mind sermons but found that a little offensive? So when somebody asks for the reasons the change has come over me, then I'm obligated to say, I got God. He sees to it I do a little better. His love, right? His way of life. Okay, his power. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. Any of you got those? It may be that he's done us more harm than we've done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we're still not too keen about admitting our faults. So they're describing for you, a lot of us don't like the word hate, but we got some people we got an idea about, and now we've got a better idea about them, but we ain't looking to rub up on them anytime soon. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. So they're suggesting they do this. They're the we, not you. And they're going to tell you why they suggest that. But how many of you have learned that resentment blocks you off and keeps you in a loop of grievance and unhappiness? And it's not necessarily spilling over on the one I want it for, is it? But it's definitely poisoning me, isn't it? So as we get a different attitude, sometimes we don't want to stay in those loops, yes? So then it says it's harder to go, nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. So it's a bigger demonstration for me to go to someone who's really done me wrong and I have a pretty bad attitude about them and tell them, this is what I did, this is how I thought, I hope someday you can forgive me, whatever it is, right? Take ownership of it. And even if I didn't play any part in it, my holding on to the grievance is still hurting me, and it may be holding them back. And given that I'm hoping that I get my release, I don't want anyone holding me back. So I've agreed to be an advocate, not a prosecutor, for the rest of my life. Does that make sense? So it tells us a little bit about the approach. It says, we go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So there's a lot of instruction in that sentence, and if you're new to the manner of living, you may not have ever had anyone unpack it for you. But one cannot go to someone that they hate in a helpful and forgiving spirit without getting prepared in the spirit to do so. That's why I've learned how to pray and meditate. Does that make sense? I've been prepared for this moment, and now I'm going to get disciplined in this moment, and I'm going to get better at capturing those thoughts, but I'm not going to be able to do any of that if I don't, number one, know the power is real, it's in me, and it'll do as I ask. Does that make sense? So it says we get helpful, go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. I'd suggest that you want to confess the former ill feeling that you've spoken or shown them, not just stuff you've thought about. Because they will not experience you as helpful if you go to them and tell them some secret about what a jerk you thought they were, and they never knew that. Any of you ever had someone tell you something like that? I knew you years ago. You were a real jerk, but now I kind of like you. Oh, I'm so glad. Some of you have had the same experience. I'm so happy for you. Okay, so under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. If I'm not centered in the Spirit, the first time they say, yeah, you're damn right you did that to me, then Joe comes out. So I've got to get ready in the Spirit. And then this is what my delivery is. Simply, we tell them we'll never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to straighten out the path. Everyone wants to know what's the catch. Why are you making this approach to me now? Why, after all this time, are you making this approach to me? I'm making this approach because I will never get over my addiction until I've done my utmost to set right my wrongs to you. This I know. I know you may not accept it from me, but I owe you the approach and the honest admission. Then you do with that as you will. Does that make sense? There's power in that. That's good. You guys are good. You're moving back and forth. It's good. All right, so we're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. Notice how they said the same thing several different ways. Do you think they were demonstrating the importance of the preparation for that? Do you think they were probably maybe telling us how many times they may have screwed it up before they actually made an approach that didn't cause more harm? Have you ever gone to tell somebody one thing and then they brought something up you didn't remember or didn't remember in the same way, and so you ripped their throat out again? Got to go make amends for the amends you tried to make? You ever do that? The reason you want to get to the place where they left you, we stick to our own. Number one, that's freedom. If I'm no longer carrying the burdens of what I perceive you did to me, then I'm truly free indeed, am I not? Because for a long time I was a product of how I responded to the world and how it responded to me. And as I grow in the Spirit, I am not a product of that. I'm a child of the living God. All right, so it says if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. So this is also an operations manual for a very complex machine, the human mind. What does that mean as you're going out and doing your amends approaches when you're not gratified with the result? Perhaps I was not calm, my manner was not calm, my presentation was not quite what I needed it to be. Maybe I wasn't entirely direct, frank, or I wasn't open to what they had to say. Or maybe I'm thinking that I'm demanding it right now and there's going to be a window of time that I'm supposed to be doing something else. Does it make sense? How many of you always want everything right now? I just like you to follow, if you're really getting stuck and you're hearing these people's promises, you got to go back and ask yourself, okay, what part could I have played in this manner of living? Was I calm, frank, and open? Oh, maybe I wasn't centered in the Spirit. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I should call the guy who's mentoring me, sponsoring me, and go over it with him. Maybe I'll be gratified after we have a chat.
Thank you.
Okay, so in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. How many of you have thought of 100 ways something could go bad and talked yourself right out of doing something you needed to do? So they're just calling to our attention how many ideations we have that'll keep us from growing and asking us just, look, you just pick a path and walk down it. We got another step. If that doesn't turn out, admit it promptly and go the other way. It's not the end of the world anymore. All right, so it says, sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own faults, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. How many of you have held a grudge against somebody because something you heard about them, and when you finally got to talk to them, what you heard about them wasn't true? So what you thought about them wasn't true? Did things melt away once you had that understanding? So this isn't mystical. This is human interaction. Okay, so it says, rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we're doing and wish us well. How many of you have gone to make an approach for amends and people say, man, just keep doing what you're doing. Whatever you're doing, better than what you were doing. How many of you have not had such a rousing reception at times? Okay, so they're going to talk about that too, because we assume it's always going to be bad, and it isn't always bad. That's all we're trying to say. All right, so occasionally they'll offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. So the important part of that was to demonstrate my faith. I'm willing to go and make my announcement to you with your permission, with tact and common sense. And if you prefer not to hear it or you want to throw me out after that, that's not saying anything about me. I've done what I came to do. Does that make sense? So then it says, most alcoholics owe money. Any of you disagree with that statement? In all the years I've been in recovery, I've met exactly one guy who claimed to not owe money. I think he's lying, but I'm going to give him a pass. at least when we first come out of addiction. We may not know we owe money. There's some things that we did when we were not terribly aware. And then there's ways I tell the story that sometimes make me innocent. No one like that in here, though. Telling them what we're trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory that it may cause financial harm. My alcoholism and your knowledge of my alcoholism or my drug addiction may well cause me to lose opportunities and thereby cause me financial harm. But if I did you financial harm because of my behavior in addiction, I owe you that explanation. Does that make sense? But you don't got to run around telling everybody that, because people don't know, they don't have to understand, and there's no reason they need to know that if you're not presenting to them that way. So be careful who you announce everything in the world about you to. Okay, so it says that approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we're sorry. They use interesting words there. We let these people know we're sorry. Think about those words, because these people agreed on every word. That sounds like a demonstration, doesn't it? Because coming from the likes of me, fresh out of addiction, me saying it has zero credibility. So if I'm going to let you know, I must be doing more, correct? So let's see what they're saying about it. It says, our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we're liable to drink if we're afraid to face them. If I don't make a plan to pay you and start paying on you now, I'm pretty sure that fear is going to drive me back to what I know. Yep. But I did misuse the money. You didn't deserve that. And can we come to an accommodation? Yes? So it says, perhaps we've committed a criminal offense. Anybody? Allegedly. Which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We've already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. How many of you have been so afraid of disclosing to someone you secretly thought probably already knew anyway that you quit jobs or broke up relationships or just went ghost on people? Wouldn't it, in retrospect, have produced a better outcome if you made an honest admission, even if it meant separation? At least you were free. Because this is just about how free do you want to be. We may not get to pick which relationships go from cradle to grave and which ones are just here for a season. But if I'm going to walk through this world very long without anesthesia, I'm going to need to at least walk through it free. Anyone else? All right, so we've already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we'd be in prison or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense such as padding the expense account. Many of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we're divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. They're going through all these different scenarios. Don't pick on one if it doesn't resonate with you. But whatever drove you into some of the spins you've been in, own that in relation to this model. Does that make sense? We make the mistake of saying, oh, I never did that. I must not be that guy. I did something, because no one gets in these rooms on a winning streak. Right? So we got a part. We just got to figure it out. All right. So although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. So lots of forms, 200 or 300 of you in here tonight. I can't possibly, I don't know how many hundred are watching online, but I can't possibly enumerate all of the ways that we may fit into the mold, but all of us got something, yes? And so there's some general principles that guide me in arming myself with the facts about myself, making reparations for harms done, and moving forward, growing in consciousness, right? Growing in conscious awareness through prayer and meditation. Does that make sense? Okay. So it says, reminding ourselves that we've decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, first thing we want to go to. Did you know that was the decision? The decision, some people think, is to not pick up no matter what. You've heard it taught for years. If I have the power to not pick up, then I lied and won. So what I agreed is unless I had a complete transformation of mind, body, and spirit, unless I had a spiritual awakening, I was going to die an ugly death. That was my admission. And not only was I dying an ugly death, but I didn't know when and I didn't know how many people I was going to affect on the way. And I couldn't live with the pain of that any longer, so I cut a deal. Said, if you'll pull this gorilla off my back, I will give you the credit for a lifetime. Every time I see a brother or sister struggling, I will advocate for them, and I will tell them of the power you deliver. Does that make sense? So it says, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences may be. Now they're going to enumerate some personal consequences that many of us have faced. We may lose our position. You may lose a job because of your disclosure, or reputation. People may think less of you because of your disclosure, or face jail. It's been known to happen. But we are willing. We have to be. So we're not declaring we're willing because we're heroes. We're willing because I've admitted defeat. It's a different boldness, isn't it? All right, so we must not shrink at anything. How many of you have done some stuff that amazed you, empowered in the Spirit? How many of you did some stuff that amazed others watching you? And did they ever share with you the power that instilled in them? I'm telling you, there's people in this room that have endured some amazingly difficult times. And yet, they got encountered, and then they got up, and they took ownership of who they had been, and they moved into a process to teach them who they really were and whose they really were. And they went out, and they're changing the world. They're sitting in this room. They're changing the world. Just know it. I'm talking to all of you. You're world changers. You're victors, not victims. Your addiction and your criminal thinking was a calling, not a curse. You gotta turn it, baby. Okay, so usually, however, other people are involved. Did you ever figure that out? Some of my knuckleheaded stuff involved others. Usually without their conscious consent. Therefore, we're not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life. What are they talking about? Yeah, I think, they're so bold in here, and we don't explain to people clearly. That's why people don't understand. I didn't just go join a fellowship and agree to sit in a room for the rest of my life. I got taught an entirely new manner of living that disclosed within me power and purpose to live in spite of difficult circumstances. And that's why abstinence is a byproduct, but it's not the goal. Awakening is the goal. Not abstinence, abstinence. I'm also obstinate, so that's also a byproduct. You too, huh? Got you, all right. All right, you and me, brother. Okay, so he had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he'd walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." So they're calling to our attention the way we think. I'm just going to go tell the judge I did it. The hell with me. Now the family's not getting taken care of. The new employer's not getting care. I'm letting everyone down again with my demonstration of heroics. Is that what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to grow spiritually? No, I want to avoid that at all costs, right? I mean, I'm willing to do it if that's what's necessary, but let's circle the wagons and see if that's what's necessary. So he said, we thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try and do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. And then it says, of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. But unpack all of that. Is that not a demonstration of changed behavior? Here's some money. I owe you more. I'll pay you every payday for however long it takes. I'm hoping someday you can forgive me, but I want you to know that I did none of this to avoid jail if that's where you want me to go. So, you got that, or I'll go do what I got to go do. Your call. And I would challenge you to think when he said that to her, he knew he meant it, but I don't think he knew the "of course she did not" part. So he probably was frightened by it, yes? So fearless does not mean without fear. It means consuming that fear for fuel, going into it. Move into the fear. Because when you move into fear, it produces a little substance called faith within you. Does that make sense? All right, so before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. So that's a pretty simple bit of instruction, yes? So the other people involved are the new family, the new employer, yes? So I would have had to go to them and get buy-in, because those are the others that would have been harmed when I went to make my declaration if I didn't have their buy-in. Does that make sense? So if we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, are you that mesmerized, or did you just fall asleep? Ask God to help. They can't hear you in Kingman or Yuma. Ask God to help. And the drastic step is indicated. We must not shrink. See how that was declarative? See how they're talking about the sensory nature of a drastic step being indicated? How many of you have known within you that a drastic step was indicated? I got to do, but I don't want to do. It's going to take a power greater than me, but if you'll go, I'll go. Or something like that, yes? That's what it's sensory, yes? Who felt it? A bunch of you, I know, I can feel you feel it. There you go. Okay, so this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. So have you ever taken money from somebody and then misplaced the money and then said, that dude did not give me the money? Where's my like handyman construction types? Did you ever get a little advance for materials and then just go magician on them? So you know this cat, because you're going to hear the rest of the story, just set the stage. This cat was one of the more religious early AAs, so his church family was important to him. And what the cat did while he was out drinking is this guy gave him some money for the church fund. And then he later said, cat didn't give me the money. And so the guy's reputation was ruined because he said he did give him the money. Make sense? All right, so he said he felt he'd done a wrong that he could not possibly make right. How many of you have had a church family? And did you find that bad conduct exacerbated the guilt you felt? I mean, we got whole religions dedicated to guilt, I think, don't we? Anyway, never mind. So if he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those that depended upon him? So there's a question mark. What right did he have? According to the guiding principles, none without their permission. So I'm going to have first have a difficult conversation with these people that are supporting me and say, look, I gotta fix this, and it may splatter a little. Yeah? How could he possibly make a public demonstration exonerating his rival? Another question mark. He's going inward. So what did he do? He defrauded the church fund. He lied about his friend. And he has no earthly idea how many people he involved in it. Does that make sense? So who could possibly know the answers for him? The power within him. The answers for you are in you. The answers for him are in him. Does that make sense? Okay. So after consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. See how the language he's using is telling you that he's really having trouble? He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. Again, my people that have had a church family, how hard would it be to quietly get up and make an explanation like that? Where's my recovery people? Any of you? How many of you got entrusted with the seventh tradition money? How many of you were a bad bet? Was it a little awkward to stand before the group and tell them you did that? So imagine this guy's fear talking to his church. It could be a little. What they're trying to do is paint a real picture, what any lengths might look like. If you're wondering what's any lengths look like for me, we don't know. The answers for you are in you. But here's what it looked like for us. Does that make sense? All right, so after the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. Said his action met widespread approval, and today he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. So he got up, he told them what he did, and the thief of the church fund becomes the most trusted citizen of the town through the power of God. Guys, we see that miracle in here every day. That's what I want to call to your attention. Some of you were notorious in your intent to do harm and wreak havoc. And you've been delivered from that. And the only cost for that delivery is give credit where it belongs. His love, his power, his way of life. All right. So then it says the chances are that we have domestic troubles. Any of you? So some of us had trouble maintaining a domestic, much less. I had to get a domestic before I could have trouble there, right? No? Come on. How many of you have started life over 2 or 3 times? Okay, so you didn't have a particularly warm domestic for a while. All right, so we doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people, but drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. Where's my meth addicts? Complicated, huh, fellas? Super complicated. Okay. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful and uncommunicative. How many of you have experienced that? Had a partner, and after a while with you, they were worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. So that's a pretty common picture, but remember, the world's simply reflecting how I'm thinking and feeling. So what I got to do to get some truth is I got to go to the next sentence. How could she be anything else? That's why they got a chapter to the wives, to the family, to the employer, to see what it looked like to have me coming, so I can grow in perspective, right? Okay. All right. So the husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor.
Christie's Cabaret.
Perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. Have any of you met he or she? The understanding one, I think they call him. In fairness, we may say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? So all they're saying is, sure, they understand, but it's not their understanding that's in question. It's your freedom that's in question. So what are you going to do to get free of that behavior that inevitably lands you in difficulties in relationships? Yes? How many of you thought that you could do one little dishonest thing and found out they begat more dishonest things? Come from one source. There's no little lies. There's no little dishonest acts. I'm not saying we're trying to be perfect. We're just saying once I know it's wrong and I act in it, now I've given myself permission to open the whole freaking door. I don't think that's what I'm doing, but that's been my experience. Okay, so a man so involved often feels very remorseful at times. How many of you have felt very remorseful at times, then reprocessed it and felt less remorseful? Okay. Especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who's literally gone through hell for him. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. So we can make light of it, but the reality is if I keep getting involved in maladaptive behavior, I'm going to get into a familiar pattern, and history would dictate that it's going to go all bad at some point. Yes? So if we're sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Question mark. Two-part question. We're sure she doesn't know. How sure are you? Or are you just mistaking her silence for ignorance? How many of you thought you were pulling off your addiction? Shh, keeping that on the down low. How many of you, when you admitted your addiction, made it unanimous? Oh, thank God he knows. I didn't think he knew. Not always. We think if she knows in a general way that we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? You don't want to tell her in detail, or you don't want to be told in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She'll want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We're sorry for what we've done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. That's what we feel we ought to do. They write down what they feel they ought to do, and then they write down another experience. Some of us don't want to learn from other people's experience. We insist on having our own. Are you a show me, don't tell me kind of person? How many of you have been warned that what you're doing is liable to end up in a bad thing? Go, yeah. And then ended up in a bad thing. You go, wow, I should have listened. Okay, so that's how this book's written. All right, so though there may be justifiable exceptions, how many of you have had a justifiable exception? Who gave you the justifiable exception? Centered in the mind, where the main problem centers? Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we've often found this the best course to take. How do I find that the best course to take? The first one, by doing the second one. I had a justifiable exception. I started spilling all over him who she was and where she was, and yeah, it went all bad. So our design for living is not a one-way street. It's as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. I always like to caution you about that. It's not a good idea to remind them of that. Let them discover that truth on their own. It's better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. There may be a time when you're just going to have to spill it and own it and live with it, and you can't even take their pain, but you at least owe them the honesty at that point. Does it make sense? So no outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Those are suggestions. If you're planning to stay together, then you may want to pray for one another to be delivered from the stuff. That's just things they learned. Okay, so keep it always in sight that we're dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk face-to-face combat. We really can't confront other people's experience of us. They'll see a different us when they can see it. And until they can see it, all my yelling ain't going to fix it. That's how I always behaved. Does that make sense? So if we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. You ever hear that? You hear it a lot in fellowships. Well, at least I'm sober. That's all I got to do today is stay sober. Think about that. If the only thing I got to do is what I've already admitted to you that I'm powerless to do, then I'm truly screwed. How many of you got sober and found out just being sober ain't all that? If I'm not sober and free, then I need anesthesia. Quick. I've proven it. So sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he's yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he's so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding as the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have had no homes today, would perhaps be dead. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. Guys, do you see the painting, the picture they're painting? How many of you in addiction, how many of you were raised in addiction and never had a stable place? And it was never safe. And so you grew in that and you produced that same unsafe space for another generation. It is like a horrific storm, isn't it? Can we own that? Because what they're telling us is that these hearts are broken. I don't mend broken hearts. Relationships are dead. I don't raise the dead. I've been raised from the dead, so I know a power who can. So I get to tell the rest of the people I encounter in my life when they ask about being raised, about hearts being healed, about a desire by this power to have a relationship with them that is fulfilling and purposeful and healing. I get to do that, and it makes my life better, yes? So then it says, we feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. Why would I cheat the new man by telling him something that silly? When there's so much more to life than sitting around abstinent looking for an excuse. So he's like the farmer who came out of the cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Another metaphor for you. Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead, and we must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we're sorry won't fill the bill at all. Why? I need to act my way into better thinking, which means I need to demonstrate better speaking and better acting toward my brothers and sisters, regardless of how I feel about them. Does that make sense? And I'm the beneficiary of that. But now, in this new manner of living, not only am I a beneficiary, but anyone who cares to pay attention can so benefit. Does that make sense? So we ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Guys, add that to your morning prayer for a week. Make that promise to yourself. My Creator, please show me the way of patience, kindness, tolerance, and love as you go through the day. Because when you start finding it on your path, you'll be experiencing it in your being. Make it a habit. Does it make sense? Who felt that? Some of you are feeling that. Good deal. That's the power we call God. You guys are... We lost them. We lost them. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. They've told us what living it looks like. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. You guys are going to go home to your families. Don't let them keep you in the role you once had, and don't leave them stuck where they are. You're born to walk out in this manner of living, and people will be attracted to that manner of living, and they will follow you out. Don't follow them in, they will follow you out. Does that make sense? They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness will make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. There may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. I'll tell you a quick story and we'll end. A lot of you have heard it before, but there was a fellow when I first came into recovery, called himself Black Wally. And Wally used to go to the jails, and he used to do all kinds of stuff. He even stole a van from a yard one time just to haul drunks to the detox. And when the judge got him before him, he said, if you stole it just to haul the drunks to the detox, we'll just give you a van. That's the kind of guy he was. Anyway, he helped me a lot in early recovery. And then I went off the rails, and I came back years later, and I went to find him to sort of make an apology for just ghosting him, and he had passed. So I could not make that approach or those amends. But several years later, I was sitting in a courtyard and a halfway house in the middle of downtown Phoenix, and I'm taking a young man through his fourth step, doing a fifth step, and as I'm going through the list of resentments and family and what have you, I realize I'm sitting with Wally's grandson. So what I'm here to tell you is God will make a way. Thank you very much.